This is a Story of Hope episode and part two of Jane Toor's story. These episodes are meant to share the real life journeys of others who have or are walking out their loss of a loved one. The movies we see on TV do a real good job of highlighting the before and after, but the truth of how things turn out lies in the middle. I'm thankful for the women who are willing to share their stories because their losses may be more similar to yours than mine, and a word from them could give you a revelation of something you've really been needing. The daily grind, the endless days of tears, the fear of never getting better, those battles are won in the middle, and those battles are what we rarely see. See, media, be it social or other, gives us unrealistic pictures of what is happening in real life. So we compare our situation to those and we end up feeling worse. In this episode, Jane shares her story of losing her husband, Dan. He survived and was healing from a double lung transplant, which is a miracle in itself. But then he died in an unexpected way. She also shares the many ways God's presence was made known in their journey and the hope that only God can give now as she grieves his death. Hey, friend. Welcome to the Grief to Great Day podcast. Do you feel like you're going crazy? Is the shower the only place for you to really cry? Are you surrounded by people, but you still feel all alone? Do you want to be the you were before your loved one died, but you have no idea how to get there? I'm Steph Cabanis, Southern by choice, wife, turtle triathlete, Jesus follower, and fellow traveler in the journey of grief. I too struggled to breathe, questioned God and my faith, and thought I would never be happy again. But God took my brokenness and He turned it into a breakthrough. So if you're ready to understand how to navigate grief, lean into your faith and take just one step towards healing, then bring your ugly cry, get into a comfortable place, even if that's your bed right now, and let the healing begin. Girl, there's hope for your future. Come on in the house and join me on the couch. I'm Steph, and this is Grief to Great Day. We have company again in this episode. Thank you for being here. I hope you feel welcomed and heard through this podcast. Hello to everyone listening in Botswana, our spotlight country this week. And California, yes, you remain the state with the most downloads. I hope this serves as a reminder that whatever state or country you're in, you're not alone as you walk through this thing called grief. So today, Jane is back in the house with part two of her story. For those of you who didn't hear or listen to episode 57, I would recommend that you check it out before listening to this episode. But as an overview, Jane and Dan have been through a grueling process of a double lung transplant. Just saying those words in no way conveys the experience. So I'm glad Jane has shared the details of some of those days. Dan is now back to doing the things he enjoys, and they are so thankful for the miracle of coming through such a difficult journey with faith intact. I wish this was the end of the story, but as you know, it is not. Today, Jane will share the turn of events that led to Dan's death because it was not lung related. Now let me tell you a little bit about our guest Jane before we get started. Jane and Dan Toor were married 40 years, and their plan was to grow old together. But God had a totally different plan that rocked their world. Dan was promoted to heaven August 14th, 2021. Through her grief journey, she came to accept that God has a plan, and it's not her plan, it is His plan, and she believes He has a purpose for her in His plan. She chooses to look back and see all the ways that God was working for their good in His plan, and that gives her hope. Jane knows that God is sovereign and He is always good, and she can trust Him. So to God be the glory. Jane Toor is a retired hospital-based speech-language pathologist. She loved treating stroke survivors and the traumatic brain injured population. Jane is blessed with 3 daughters and their families who continue to support her through this journey of grief. She's thankful for friends who are just present and allow her to navigate this journey of grief. And a special thanks to Pastor Dina Kennedy and messages from her church, also my church, Open Door, that have helped her lean into God and His truth. We're going to pick it up from when Jane and Dan are coming back home. And here she is to finish her story.
Couples that moved us down in April, moved us back home. We got back home on October 25th. And my husband, believe it or not, was on a ladder October 31st, cleaning out gutters. And I'm just like, okay, what are you doing? He's, you know, but that would be him. He's doing all the leaves in December. Um, it was all good. But then Dan's skin cancer just kept getting out of hand, and he ended up getting a skin graft from his leg up to his forehead in end of October of 2020, and then you could just and then even after that, you could still see some more spots. So we ended up having some surgery December 7th. It was a parotidectomy where they take out part of your facial nerve, but they could only take it out to his cheek. And the rest of that was they couldn't get the whole thing because it would have totally disfigured him. And so our life was just like really rocked on December 24th. We were told to go see like a radiation oncologist December 24th, 2020. It's Christmas Eve. And we spent the night before. And so we're there all day and we see a chemo physician and a radiation oncologist. And they sat down, they both said the same story to us. They said, here's the deal. If you had an immune system, you'd have 90% chance of a cure with 7 weeks of chemo and 7 weeks of radiation. However, you don't have an immune system, so you have a 10% chance of a cure with a 100% chance of this all coming back in 18 months if you do 7 weeks of radiation and 7 weeks of chemo. And if the cancer comes back during those 7 weeks, you'll have less than 6 months to live. And you're just like, I just cannot believe this. I mean, you're just in shock. And then they said, well, we need to make the radiation mask too today. So we were there all day because they wanted us to start this in January. So we go home. It's COVID still. We wake up and try to put a happy face on, go to Raleigh, do Christmas outside on the porch as we watch the grandkids, 3 grandkids in Raleigh. And Eric and Tom are the parents, and they're just, we're trying to have a happy day there. And then we come back home, and our daughter from Indiana, Ashley, comes. And again, God's timing is perfect because I was just so thankful. It was Christmas break, and so she brought the two littles, Hudson and Finley, and what a nice distraction for us all. And so Ashley and her dad re-listened to what Duke had to say, and we were doing a lot of fun things at the house at the time. I called Duke and I said, "Okay, what if we do nothing?" I said, "You see my husband? He's golfing. He looks like the picture of health. He can he's installing doors. He's doing home maintenance stuff. What are his chances if he does nothing? What's the time frame? A year or less." So Dan heard that. They're wanting us back down at Duke, and I said, "You know what? We don't do anything unless we pray. We're not going to do that." So finally, I think it was probably maybe January 6th or something. I said, they need to know. So Dan and I went for a walk, and he said, I wish there was another way. I said, there isn't. And he said, well, and I didn't know what he's going to say. He says, I'm going to choose life. And I was just so grateful for that. So we packed as much life as we could in that time. And also, what happened just even at that time in January, we were still worshiping with our local church, but also online, but also New Hope Church in Durham. God was just calling me to, you got to take this rooted class. You got to take this rooted class. It's like 12 weeks or whatever. And I said to Dan, I said, God's really saying to do that. I'm so glad we did. We ended up having an online small group, and it just helped us get into our faith. And we had a community that was definitely praying for us. And so we tried to pack as much life as we could. in, and Ashley, Erica, and Lisa, and Lisa's husband John. We went to Key West for Dan's birthday in March. Had a great time. Dan was feeling good. Made some good memories because Dan was never about vacation. You want to do something? No, I don't want to do anything. I traveled when I was working. Like, okay. So it was just a fun trip. And then we came back from Key West and we had to go to Duke, and they did a PET scan and they said, wow, you've got three new tumors here and we should probably do some palliative radiation. So we said, well, how much do you want to do? 2 days a week or three? And we said 3 days, 3 days a week. So we didn't have to do it quite yet because we were ready to go for a trip to West Palm Beach. So we went to West Palm Beach. Dan and I are great golfers. We went with Ashley and her family, and that was a good trip. And we come back to Duke, and they said, "Oh, that's all growing, and now it's one big mass." And I looked at that and I said, "Thank you, God," because we were given the choice between 2 weeks of treatment or 3 weeks of treatment, and then you totally took this out of hand, and we needed 5 day a week treatment for I think 4 weeks. And I would have already always questioned maybe we didn't choose the right amount of treatment, but it grew so much by the time they did the mask and everything, and we got back from West Palm Beach that it was out of our hands. So that's the choice we did. So Dan did 5 weeks of radiation, and so we're just pumped with that, thinking that's all working. Well, we go back for a visit later, and I remember Dan sitting in the chair, and Dr. Mallory said it didn't work, and you're just like, and we had planned to go to Hilton Head and treat the kids to all three families to a Hilton Head vacation for Dan's first lung anniversary, as they call it in the lung transplant world. And it was COVID, we couldn't. And we had already planned this for July of 2021. And so there was one more payment to do that. And Dan goes, well, what if I don't make it? I said, we're still going to have that party. And so all three families went to Hilton Head in July. It was July 10th through the 17th. Dan wasn't feeling well. By then, he was on a 150 fentanyl patch and 100 Oxycontin a day, and he just kept taking more meds and more meds. And so, but he was able to have good conversations. I've got recorded some nice conversations with him, with the kids. And so that was just all great and good. And then when we came back here in July, Dan started jerking. And I thought, what is that jerking about? And I think it was towards the end of July, and it turns out he was having these myoclonic jerks as a reaction to the fentanyl. And so I really needed to change meds. And so we had called Duke, and our plan was to get a pain pump in his head to take care of that. But then he ended up falling. He and I both fell one day, and it was in August, early August. And I said, you know, Dan, I said, I'm seeing a counselor. Wouldn't you? I think we should go see a counselor. And finally, Dan relinquished, and we did go see the counselor. And the counselor brought up that you talked about your funeral. And so we ended up coming home, and there was an opportunity to do that. And I'm so glad I did. And I remember him sitting in the sunroom, and I said, we're not saying that you're dying. Oh, God performs miracles every day. But I said, what would you do like? I said, I know you want to be cremated. Do you want me to spread your ashes? No. Well, what do you want me to do with them, right? I want you to keep me with you. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I said, well, what kind of music would you want for your funeral? Do you want hymns? No way, right? Right. So we had a chance to pick out some music too. So that was just really awesome. Well, he was jerking, and I had called Erica to come because I just knew I couldn't take care of him at that point. And he went to go to the restroom, and I said, "Don't let go of that walker," because I suggested he take a walker. Well, he did, and bam, he went down. I said, "Do not get up." I did not have my phone in my hip pocket, and what a blessing. The neighbor next door, Audrey, had just said to me that morning, Jane, how's Dan doing? I said, he's jerking. She goes, I don't have you on my list for do not disturb, but I'm going to put that on today. Thank you, Jesus, because Dan decided to get up, bam, hit his head on that tile. And I already had an open wound up there from the cancer, and it was green. And I called Audrey, and Audrey and Jim came up and picked Dan up off the floor. Um, and Erica came later that night, and I'd called the girls, and the other two girls were able to come in, and so they were able to help him for a couple days. But our youngest had to go back to Indiana because school was starting with the kids, and Erica went back to Raleigh. Lisa had to go back. But I had flown my best friend in. Thank you for Pam. She was a widow at 37, and I think God put that connection in too because she came and she was able to stay as well. And we were able to call hospice. And again, I had had a chance to meet with Dr. Lee. I worked with him at palliative care, and I had had some phone conversations with him. And so we kind of waited to the last minute to put Dan in hospice because the feeling was is that he wouldn't get his lung transplant meds. And I said, but he needs those to survive. And he said, well, we don't, we just, it's a heart patient. We don't give the heart meds. I said, no, you don't get it. I said, you don't give him his lung transplant meds, he's going to die. So they made it so that I could give him his lung transplant meds. So hospice came out to the house, and thankfully Dan was not real lucid because Dan had wanted to pass away at home. And so we were able to take him to hospice. And who would have known this too? It's like God, again, God was just preparing me. Because my last year at Biden, there was another speech pathologist that had volunteered at the hospice house, and I thought, oh, well, I can do that. So my last year of employment, I was volunteering at the hospice house on Monday nights. So when we get off the ambulance, the hospice people are kind of like, "Do we know you?" And so what a blessing that was too. And so he was in hospice for about 5 days, and the first, I guess maybe the girls, yeah, the girls still were here, and they were able to visit with him, and that was nice because I was busy at the funeral home, and again, what another blessing there because I thought, oh, I just got to pick out this urn or whatever. And Thad and Aaron calls me next, texts me and says, "Do you realize there's no pressure to pick out this urn, and you don't have to do that right now, and you don't even have to have an urn. My dad's not in the urn; he's in this little box." I'm like, oh, okay, good. That took all the pressure off, which was just so wonderful. So I didn't buy an urn that day. I didn't like any of those anyway. And so when Dan's in hospice and the family leaves, it was, I was praying for that miracle because God can do all things. At the same time, I was praying for God's will. I, of course, wanted Dan to live. And it was just, I said, God, you're able to do all things. And so I really wasn't in denial. I was just believing for this miracle. And then he ended up, I wasn't sleeping. And it was really cool during that time that I was at hospice. I kept thinking, what could I do in lieu of flowers? What could I do in lieu of flowers? And so I thought, I'm going to call a fellow transplantee, Kelly. Kelly had idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis too and received her lung transplant a little bit after Dan's. Well, unfortunately, Kelly ended up going home with oxygen. How heartbreaking is that? Because she immediately developed chronic rejection. So I called her and I said, Kelly, I said, I know you're waiting to get a second lung transplant. And I said, in lieu of flowers, we'd like to have the money go to your GoFundMe account. I said, we're blessed to be a blessing to you. And I said, you can talk to Dan. And so she talked to Dan and thanked him for that. And so I got that straightened out too. And I just, again, I was just counting on a miracle. I really was. And I was expecting a miracle. And, it wasn't my miracle though. It was God's miracle because I slept I journaled that night about 5 o'clock and I said, God, just help me just listen to these awful breath sounds that, what do you want to call it? Rattle, death rattle. Help me to listen to all these awful breath sounds amongst this worship music and help me sleep. Well, sure enough, it was like 5 o'clock in the morning, and one of the hospice nurses tapped me on the head, tapped me on the shoulder about 7:10, and said, "Well, he's gone." And so I was just like at peace. It's like, "Thank you, Jesus." And I almost went through this period of just asking a couple things. First of all, I was in a fog, and secondly, I was just like running around just confused and stuff. Secondly, I was just asking God why. Like, I don't get the why. Why would you have a miracle of a lung transplant that's life giving, July 3rd, 2019, and then he has all this pain and suffering, um, and he passes away August 14th, 2021. And I have been searching, and so after he passed, I ended up leaving because Dan's service was on August 21st, and our anniversary, our 41st anniversary, would have been August 23rd. And my best friend said, "Well, the girls want to take you out to eat." I said, "No." I said, "We're going to go back to Columbus, Ohio, and I just need to leave." And so I left, and then I got really busy. I needed to be busy. And so it's like, give me something to clean. I said, Ashley's house, clean, clean, clean. And we were able to have a party for Dan, a celebration of life for Dan in Fort Wayne, Indiana. We were able to do that. And I was able to, at that time, because my grief hadn't really hit me. I think I still in shock. Be able to go to Kokomo, Indiana, because people that had been former patients of mine had driven from Kokomo to Fort Wayne. It's about 2.5 hours, and other friends too. And so I was able to go back to Kokomo, do some golfing and all that stuff too. And then when I came back in October, I was better able to manage things. And I'll tell you something that I think that's important, even as you're older, as you're getting older with your spouse or whatever. God led me to do this. While Dan was just in this coming home and transplant phase and stuff, there was just a knowing that I needed to videotape some things. So I had videotaped him spraying termites, how to use the leaf blower, how to, he loved to use the air fryer, all that stuff. So there's just a knowing in that. And there was also just we were able to have, what a blessing. I don't know if there's somebody in your house that does just all the things. Dan did all the things. That was his love language. And so, but that's not always good because Dan did all the finances too. And so we were able to have this discussion of that's not good because Dan would say, "Oh, you're always going to have the money." I said, "It doesn't matter if I don't know how to get a hold of it, right?" And so we were able to make a book. Dan had made a book. Dan and I had made this book with here's the investments, here's who you call, here's the phone numbers, here's the insurance, here's the contacts for that because I knew none of that. And so even if you don't have an illness in your house, I would encourage people to make that book because it's not I think my journey would have been so awful had I not had that book. And so that was just really helpful for me for when I came back, and I was able to do those things, but it was hard. And when I came back in October, I don't think this was by chance. I went for a walk, and who do I run into? Pastor Dina Kennedy. Now I never see her on my walks, and she invites me to this online grief group, and I said, "Nope." She said she heard about Dan, but I like to go to this online grief group. And I said, "No, I can't do that." I said, let's see, when Pam's husband died when she was 37, it was my job for her psychologist to take her to this grief group. And it was one of the most awful things for both of us. And we just cried, and I could only take her 2 times. She says, "Do not bring me back." So I said, "I'm not doing that." So I didn't go to that grief group. Went back to Indiana in January. Then got to do all the fun things with the grandkids. Again, it's a distraction, right? I wasn't really dealing with my grief, but I'll tell you what happened is at Christmas time, before I went to Indiana, there was this box that came through Amazon, and I thought, called the kids finally. I said, "This box has been sitting here. Did you send it?" No, I opened it up, and what was it? It was the most beautiful gift from Pasadena. It was a Hope Gathering box. And in it, it had waterless mascara, it had a Bible, it had a journal, it had a pen, just tissues, Bible verses, and it had a book called Scarred Hope. So I took this book, Scarred Hope, to Indiana to read. Again, here's another God story. I read that book, I'm in Indiana, I finish reading it, I'm thinking I'm going to write a text to Pastor Dina thanking him for this. But lo and behold, on my phone that exact day, that exact morning, is an email from Dina, Pastor Dina, saying, not going to presume that you're ready for this or anything, but if you want, I'm doing that online grief group. And I thought, okay, God, this is what you want me to do. I will do that group. So I did do that group. I think it was last spring, and I did that group, and it was hard, but it was good too. It was just the right things that Pastor Dina would say, and Pastor Dina had also said, she's such a gracious person, and I can't think of her leading that group while she's still grieving, because your heart just hurts. And so she had set a bookmark, and it says, the only way to remove pain from death is to remove love from life, and I'll hold on to love. And in the meantime, I was trying to find a perfect place for Dan, and so the space I had him in, and I went and I'm thinking, what's in this? I'm like, oh, this is hunting stuff. So it was just so cool. I was so comforted by then to find, I could find a hunting bag, and his ashes are in the hunting bag, and it's got a little Christmas ornament of Dan and I on there, and that bookmark, and it's just perfect for him. So at that time, I was able to do all that. And then I know that my grandson in Indiana said, Mimi, when are you coming back to Indiana? And I thought, no, I've been here. I'm not going to come for your birthday in August. I just need to push through my grief. And so that's where you come in on the story stuff, because meanwhile, I'm reading a wonderful book because I'd seen this video, and then I ordered the book. It was on YouTube, Divine Disruption by Tony Evans, and that was all about four kids who are in the that are pastors. And I think it's from Jonathan that said, we did all the right things. We had people marching around the house like the walls of Jericho, and we're a faith family, and still you took my mom with cancer. And I thought, wow, I could just really relate to that book, and I would recommend that book. And then I also read Max Lucado's book, You'll Get Through This, and that was very good too. But then I was searching, praying, searching, and I thought, well, I knew that Pastor Dina had said something was going to be going on in the church in first fall small groups, and I had not been part of Open Door. Just to back up a little bit, when I came back in October, I knew I needed to find a new church home, one that was supportive, and I found that at Open Door. They did a wonderful series on joy and lament, and I thought, you know what, that's right. Christmas isn't always this joyous time, and it just spoke to me, and I thought, wow, these people it's just, all these services are speaking to me, and it was just very genuine. And I joined the church and decided to be a greeter. I need to get involved. So anyway, so I was doing all that, and so I think it was maybe, I didn't know when the small group started, but I thought maybe you had posted your small group at the end of July or something, and I thought, oh, here's a small group. This is the group that maybe was going to happen. So it said, tell me a little bit about yourself. And so I started texting, and you stepped back saying, wow, you've been through a lot. You're the first guy to sign up. And I related to you because your story was very much like mine, in that you were a caregiver too. And it had to do with melanoma, and Dan had squamous cell carcinoma. And I'm thinking, so here we are. We would just text it back and forth. And I would have some triggers like I'm making bratwurst and sauerkraut, and who would think that that would cause you to cry? But sure enough, uh, I'm bawling through that because that's something that Dan had made. And so I just really got connected with you. And I thought, it's going to be my job. I am going to make myself listen to every one of your podcasts before you started that grief share group. And so I did. And that was such hard work. And I cried through all of that, but it was good because you need to go through the grief so it doesn't hit you for years later. And I just needed to do that. And so then I did the grief share group with you. I think I only attended like 3 sessions because it's back in Indiana. But I really found for me, the grief share group is hard because they don't really care for people telling all those stories and stuff, versus your podcast just really spoke to me. But I'm making myself go through that grief share group because on my own now, because it's things that I feel like I need to hear and reflect on. And then at the same time, was just led, just even last week again, to to listen to Pastor Aaron's series on For a Purpose, because I'm looking for my purpose. And he had said something like, pressure's off. You don't have to look for your purpose. God's already got a purpose for you, and it's his purpose. And I had also listened to a podcast by Louis Giglio that says, God has a plan. It's not your plan, it's his plan. And he has a purpose for you in his plan. And just even last week, because I was just again just still searching, and I'm thinking, okay, God, what is all this about? And for me, this was what he revealed to me. I had prayed, and Dan had prayed that we could show others what it was to look like to go through a trial, a health trial, and see Jesus. And he said to me, well, Jane, that cancer was still part of the health trial. And that had never occurred to me, but it was. And who are we to expect things from God? I expected and wanted a healing. But you know what? He's God. He is sovereign. He created this world. He's in control. He knows all the things. And how dare I demand something from him? Because he already knew this. He gave us life. And again, in Psalm 139, he ordained each of our days. And so you just can't choose what you want, right? And I was only wanting the transplant story and not the cancer story. I wasn't. So I'm just one day at a time. Sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's not. But instead of me looking for a purpose, I feel like God is already putting me and using my gifts of mercy and encouragement and help to help in the little things with people that are around me and to tell my story. And so that's what when you asked if I wanted to be on your podcast, I said, yeah, because I said, I think Pastor Aaron said in that purpose series, out of great pain comes great purpose. And so I'm hoping that there'll be, not hoping, I know there'll be some opportunities. I'm actually excited to see what God's going to do, but I don't need to search for it. He'll show me.
I totally believe he will because you are willing. And thank you for sharing your story. I know that was hard. I remember the first time we met, we were at Panera, and there was such pain in your story, but there was never, never a moment that you weren't giving God glory. It was incredible. So even in today, what you said, what you saw was God's timing. What you were thankful for was his timing and friends and support and the church. And even when the house flooded, when life is absolutely chaotic, I mean, a lung transplant, that's grueling. And then your house floods and you're not there, but you were thinking it was more, hurricane related. So you have it checked on. And then who comes in to help? The fact that you can look at that and be thankful is beautiful because a lot of times in these moments, you can't see the good. All you feel is the overwhelm and the bad and the pain, but you've always seen the good. And that's God. Even the coping classes, all of that. Not that it's an easy journey because I know what you walked through has been so hard, but you are giving God glory. And you help all the time. You're always willing to help. You brought people to the grief group.
That's right.
Yeah, but I mean, the fact that you showed up, the fact you were greeting at church and greeting and grieving. I mean, that's hard stuff. Listening to the podcast and watching the videos for Grief Share, that's hard. But you're right, you have to walk through it because if you don't, it's going to come back to you. I like what you said. It's God's plan, not ours. And we get twisted up in that because we expect things to happen like we expect things to happen. And then when it doesn't, it just throws you for a loop because who would have thought you'd have to go through so much and then go
That's
through so much again? I mean, those are the things that people really struggle with, the why question. So I wanted to talk to you about some of those things. And you and I can relate on a lot with the caretaking. You mentioned that when the oxygen came to your house, that was kind of like, wow, nobody knows he's sick. I remember sitting on the steps of my house, having the front door open, watching that home medical van pull in. And I was like, oh no, not my house, not my house. And it pulls in your house. Your life changes in those moments. It's like you want to have a tantrum and just scream, no, but it's happening. Tell me, like, with the medications and you're overwhelmed and you're tired and Dan needs help, and I mean that's you're being pulled in a million different ways. What would you share with somebody going through that right now or having gone through that to like quiet the absolute disbelief?
You know, I think you lean on God and you say, okay, God, you know that this is already going to happen, and you've equipped me to do these things. I just feel like God equips you, and you have to just cry out to Jesus, and He'll give you the strength. And I think it's important that you surround yourself with safe friends that you can share with and be honest with, because it's tough being a caregiver. I think everyone kind of sees the patient, but they don't see the caregiving and how stressful that is and how tiring it is. And I remember just wanting there to be a point where I didn't have to be the caregiver anymore. I just wanted to be the wife. But honestly, I didn't get to do that. Not very often, you know, and it's like not everybody understands that. So if you can just have those friends, and even now, they'll say, how are you, Jane? And you just want somebody to be present. They don't have to give you an advice. They just need to be there and listen to you go blah 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 blah. You don't want them to fix it because
Right.
they don't understand because they haven't been through it. So until you've been a caregiver, you don't realize how just worn out you are. But it's interesting. I've got like five good friends, and they're all caregivers for their parents. And I thought, okay, so that's my role. I'm just supposed to like listen and empathize. But caregiving is hard, because when you've got a loved one that's sick, they don't want to be sick. Dan just wanted to be normal. And so that was a challenge in itself because there's part of them that just, I think, resents you taking care of them, and they'd like this whole illness to go away. Well, that creates a whole another set of issues if you're the caregiver, because then there aren't people at the hospital telling him no, it's you. That's hard.
It is, and there was one day that Monica and I never fought, but there was one day that got very ugly, and it was shocking. And so we had all these friends come over, and they're like, "Go, you need to just leave." And I'm like, "Yeah, I need to leave. I didn't want to leave, but I
Right.
needed to leave." And that's hard too. And when I know you've been in healthcare as a speech language pathologist, but as a wife, when you see all the tubes that's like, so you're the caregiver in certain moments that you really don't want to be, but then you see all the tubes and you can't be a caregiver. You're like the wife because it looks so different to you. And
Hmm.
it's kind of like the worst of both worlds. But you said something about praying for, and I was very impressed with this because I cannot say that this is what I did. You said you were praying for healing and you were also praying for God's will. I prayed for healing because I was on board with Monica being healed, and that was the expectation, our expectation. But I also prayed that he would take her. So I found it striking that you were like, you left room for God's will, and I did not.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
was like, it needs to either be this or that. But in the end, God did heal, but in a
He
different
did.
way. And I used to hate that when people said, "Oh, he'll heal on the other side." I was like, "No, no, no, no. In the Bible, he healed on this side." But ultimately, over time and looking back and trusting God, you see so much that you've already seen that it's
Yes,
just God being present and
sir.
he will work his plan for you. And share with everybody what you shared with me as far as after Dan's death, the cards.
Okay, so our daughter Ashley, and I'm sure this was hard for Dan, but she has a giftedness of being a gift giver. and such insight. And so she ended up buying cards for not only me for anniversaries, birthdays, Christmas, but also for her siblings, for her sisters, and I think for herself. I know for herself, and I think for the grandchildren too. And it'll be like for the grandchildren's weddings and stuff. And so she had these put in a yellow envelope, and Dan was kind of hanging on to those. And I said, "Oh, I know what those are, right?" And so he wrote in all those cards. And so actually, I've got three on my counter, and it's cards that are from anniversary, birthday, Christmas, and they just have really sweet words in them. And, one was said, "Oh, hope you're doing well. I'm golfing up here with Jesus." You know, and so that was just hard for him to do those things. But I'm so glad I have those, and I'm so glad that she thought to do those things. I was thinking this morning. I was thinking about Romans 8:28, and it says, "All things work together for good for those who love God and are called according to His purpose." And what stood out to me this morning, because I kind of woke up to that, it's His purpose. It's not our purpose. It's His purpose. And I remember in hospice saying, God, you had your plan. I had my plan. My plan and Dan's plan was to get a pain pump, right? And Duke was going to take care of that. But you had a different plan. Your plan was to take away his pain forever, and
Yeah.
that just hit me too. So
Well, I think that's acceptance and yielding to God's will, which is so hard in the
it
middle of
is.
grief because you get stuck on the why. I know that I didn't know what my purpose was supposed to be. I was very confused, and so I was like, I'm gonna go to Iraq and be a missionary. And my friends thought I was crazy. They had to calm me down, and they kept saying, "You're not serious." I'm like, "Why not? I got a public health degree. I can help." And they pretty much, said, "You're talking crazy. Let
That's
that
right.
go." But I needed something tangible and big to say that I had meaning to my life, to have that purpose, because that's what we're here for. And I believe with you and with me that we don't have to, like you said, we don't have to search it out. We just have to be willing for God to show us, and the doors will open. They might not be the door to Iraq, but that's not God's plan either. They can be smaller doors within your family, within your church and your community, and the impact is just as great. So,
Yeah,
like,
I think you just have to be willing, and even though you may not feel like you're equipped, if God's asked you to do that,
yes,
just like your ministry, He's going to provide a way. So you have to have ears tuned to the Holy Spirit, and He'll show you.
yeah, yeah,
Because there are no coincidences. Before I became a Christian, I was like, "Oh, that's pretty lucky," or "What a coincidence," right?
yeah,
But it turns out those things, like if somebody's on your brain or something, you should. That's God prompting you to call them.
yes,
And so you learn that as you lean into God and walk with Him, He'll show you. But you have to have ears that are attentive. And it's important to have that relationship with Christ. It's not a religion, it's a relationship. And so you
yes.
have to have ears to hear and eyes to see and a heart that is prompted.
And you have to be willing and show up.
That's right.
And that's what you have, I believe, done from day one. And I feel like your story is going to be very impactful. And it's not easy now. It's still hard to share now, but
It
yet
is.
you're doing it. You're doing it. And you may change somebody's minute, hour, day. You I mean, you never know. And that's for God to do. We just have to show up and do what we can do. And you did. And I thank you.
Well, I thank you for inviting me on this podcast, and you're part of the story. And God led me to you, and there's a purpose, and we want to give. I just want to give God all the glory
Yes.
because He's a good Father. And even though we can be angry and mad, and yes, I have been angry and mad, and actually, I would also say that it's just been good to get some physical exercise. That's really helpful with your grief. And so I have a slam ball that I have in the garage that I slam down sometimes. But it's all for God's glory. You have to look at it and just truly believe that He is sovereign and that
Yes.
He's in control, and we trust Him, and He knows all our details. And it's not what we want, it's His, and we give Him all the glory.
I can't end on anything better than that.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jane. Like Jane, I was expecting a miracle. However, Jane allowed for God's will to be done, whereas I really didn't. I don't know where you are today. You may be a caregiver, you might still be in a fog, or you could be looking for a reason not to give up. Wherever you are, you need to know that you're not going crazy, and wherever you are today, this is not your forever. Go after God with whatever you have in your heart. He can handle it. You've listened to the steps that Jane has taken and is still taking through the pain to continue the healing process. You know, the grief process is slow and every step requires a decision. You're still here for a reason. You still have a purpose to fulfill. Please choose to take the steps. Your journey works or the work of your journey for this week are back to the powerful basics. Pray, read, and rise. And here are other ways to help you move forward. Join the private Facebook group. It's over 100 members strong now, and you will feel welcomed and supported by other faith filled Christian women walking out the hardest time of their lives. This group provides a place where other Christian women get it and can support you in a way those around you cannot. Purchase the What to Do After the Loss of a Loved One workshop. You know, it's a perfect time to take this workshop. It's not a 1 day deal because I recommend it be taken over 4 weeks since it's broken into 4 sections like a mini support program to give you direction and action steps towards healing. This is what you need in your first year or if you feel stuck, and it'll help strengthen you through the holiday season. If you don't have a church home, visit my church and Jane's, opendoorchurch.com. Links to everything you need are in the show notes. In the meantime, remember who holds your future and know that you are not alone. And keep on coming back to the house, keep sitting on the couch, and keep taking those steps, small, slow, or ugly, towards your healing. Thank you for being here today, for showing up. If this podcast has given you hope, encouragement, or helped you in any way, share it with a friend, either in a text or on your social platforms. Also, please subscribe, rate, and leave a written review on iTunes. It's a huge blessing for me to know that you're out there. Lastly, and this is important, you are not alone. Connect with me on the Grief to Great Day website, the link is below, and sign up for our free newsletters. I want to be able to pray for you by name. Remember, grief isn't something you're going to get over, but a great day is something you can get to.